Good evening. Welcome to the September 23rd West Clermont School Board meeting. I'll go ahead and call it to order. Mr. Romano, will you take roll, please?
Yep. Mr. Patton.
Present.
Mr. Rudy.
Present.
Ms. Sanborn.
Present.
Mrs. Spencer.
Present.
And Mr. Chelmley let us know he would be absent.
Thank you. Will you please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge of Allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Excuse me.
Next, it looks like we have the motion to adopt the agenda. I will put that out in the form of a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Rudy. Is there any discussion? Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Patton.
Yes.
Mr. Rudy.
Yes.
Ms. Sanborn.
Yes.
Mrs. Spencer.
Yes.
4 yes.
Looks like we'll be, looks like Ms. Ellie Preston will be doing the report card update.
What is?
It's not on.
There we go. Now it sounds like it is. Okay. So this evening I have the distinct honor and pleasure on behalf of the district sharing information to you that hits the highlights of our 2023-2024 district report card. This really is a celebration story, and while we're not, exactly 100% where we'd like to be, our results definitely show that we are a district on the rise. So this slide shows our overall state report card rating as well as each of our component areas. For the second year in a row, we have earned 4 stars, which demonstrates that we are exceeding state standards. And tonight I'll dig into a little bit of each of the measures and just kind of, again, showing you the things that we're really proud of as a district. And it really is a testament to the work of our support staff, our teachers, our administrators, etc. So the report card, really, this is a slide that shows how each of our buildings, their overall rating. And so one of the things that I think is a takeaway for us here is that even though each of our buildings represents a unique community, a unique school community that has, varying degrees of, student demographics. So some of our buildings have more English learners. Some may have students who have higher levels of economic disadvantagement, students with disabilities, etc. Even though we have some differences, and in some cases more significant differences between our buildings, our results really remain fairly consistent. And I think that really reflects the strong work that we've been doing across the district to align our programs and our practices, and to really ensure that regardless of where of the school that a student attends, they will have the same opportunities to receive a high quality education that will prepare them for their future. Within the county, one of the things that we're really proud of is that even with some systemic differences, some significant systemic differences between ourselves and other districts in the county, we really are continuing to perform at high levels. And so you'll notice West Clermont there in yellow, and a few measures that I think are really important to point out. So our value-added gain index, which I'll talk a little bit more about later, was the highest, that across the county, and our gap closing, we are one of only one of 2 districts in the county to earn 5 stars in gap closing. And yet when you look under the hood a bit, you see, as we all know, we're the largest district in Clermont County. And a few key pieces to point out: we have the highest number of students who are are considered to have high mobility. And what that really is referencing are students who don't attend just one elementary school within our district over the course of a given school year. So students who may either come to us after the school year has started, they may attend one elementary school for a period of time, then withdraw, enroll in another one of our elementary schools, then back again to another elementary school over the course of the same year. And so over 750 of our students last year were considered those high mobility students. And clearly that poses some potentially significant challenges where you don't have that same consistency over the course of the year. We have over 3,500 of our students who have economic disadvantagement, over 1,200 students with disabilities, and over 200 English learners. And yet, even with those differences that really are very, that can pose potentially complex challenges, we are still performing in spite of those challenges. And it's something that we're really proud of, that we really want all students to have the opportunity to, when we say every learner, every day, and every way, it's not just like a statement that, sounds like a good tagline. It really drives the decisions that we make across the system. And when you look at how we're performing, even with those differences in place, we're really proud of that. So our achievement, our performance index score, which is the measure that's used to give us our achievement rating, is the highest that we've had since COVID. Again, it continues to rise each year. And that really looks at the performance level of all students. And so we're looking to ensure that students who've been less than proficient make it to proficiency, students who've been proficient achieve at even higher levels. And your performance index score is kind of the combination. It looks at the performance level of all students when that rating is determined. And so again, we're continuing to be on the rise each year. So when you look at the trends that exist between our performance index score and the state, again, since COVID, we are growing, our performance index score is growing exponentially greater than that of the states. And so you'll see, like in that second graph there, when like last year the performance index of the state went from 80.91 to 80.96. The gap that you'll notice, the gap between our 84 and our 85.1, it's continuing to grow higher and higher, and we anticipate that this is a trend we'll continue to see over time. So our progress measure, this is our value-added kind of gain index score, where they're looking at the growth of students. So achievement is looking at whether they met proficiency. Value-added is looking at the progress, the growth that students have made. And the goal, which is kind of like the baseline, I suppose, maybe not the goal. The baseline, it looks at a value-added gain index of 0. That's considered sort of average or anticipated growth. When you look at our value-added gain index over the last 2 years, we've made significant growth. Our students have made significantly more than 1 year of growth, 2+ years of growth over those last few years. So much so that this year our value-added gain index score puts us in the top 11% across the entire state. And when we take a deeper look at that, one of the things that you'll notice when we pull it apart and look at it by content area specifically, some patterns emerge that I think really show the return on the investment that you have made as a board. And so this graph is showing us, when we look specifically at our math growth over the last 2 years. If you remember, we just completed last year our 2nd year of our implementation of our math curriculum. And so the investment that the board made in ensuring that our students and staff had access to high quality instructional materials, we see the impact and the result of that on the growth that our students were able to make. When you look at that for science, we've had 1 year of science curriculum implementation, and the same thing poses true for that. ELA is what we're on right now, and so we have not had access, students and staff, to that high quality instructional material, and so we imagine that what we saw with math over a 2-year period of time is what we're anticipating we'll see with ELA as well. And so I just think it's really important for you to understand and recognize that your decision to really make a financial investment, not only in high quality instructional materials, but in the coaching supports and supporting teachers and really understanding how to leverage those materials to provide evidence-based instruction for our students, it's paid off significantly. And again, when we look at gap closing, and so gap closing, in order for us to, as a district or as a state, to ensure that all students are reaching the high expectations that the state has set out for them, certain subgroups across the state have not met that goal. And so the state established goals for each of the subgroups that are continuing to work towards a goal of 100% essentially. And so what we see here is that not only are we closing the gaps for students, but we're doing so at a much higher rate than what has been expected for us. And we're, as such, we're significantly exceeding state standards. And so that's something that, again, is a testament to us working towards high performance and growth for all students. Graduation rate. One of the things that I think is important for us to remember, and this is one of those where the measure is based off of like data that has happened like a few years behind us. And so our graduation data that's being reported on the 23-24 report card was looking at data from the 21-22 and the 22-23 report card. And so while we demonstrated an increase in our graduation rate, it doesn't even account for the things that we've put in place over the last, the last 2 years. And so we anticipate that this is going to continue to rise every year. It does look at the average of your 4-year graduation rate and your 5-year graduation rate, with the goal being 93% at the state level. And so last year it was the average of 91, it was like 91.6 between the average of those two, which was higher than last year, which was in like 89. The other measure that that the state of Ohio sets forth is the early literacy component, and the early literacy component is made up of three sections. They look at students who meet proficiency in 3rd grade. They look at students who were promoted who met the promotion score to move to 4th grade, and how you're improving students from being off track, how you're decreasing the number of students being on track to on track over the course of a year. And so you'll notice here, and this has only been in place for a 3-year period of time, and so each year we've improved. I think it's important to note that the promotion to 4th grade had the way in which you meet that promotion score, it has increased each of those 3 years. And so it is not just we weren't just comparing apples to apples over that 3-year period of time, but instead the bar that students had to meet in order to be promoted to 4th grade continued to go up each of those 3 years. This year, in the 23-24 school year, that promotion to fourth grade is proficiency. So previously, over the last few years, a student could be less than proficient and meet that promotion score. This year is the first year that the promotion score is the same as meeting the proficiency mark. And so even though the goal was higher each of the years, we met that goal and are continued to improve in that area. And again, this is before we've had our high quality instructional materials in literacy as well. So this shows one of those three components, which is that third grade reading score. And again, we've shown progress in that each of the 3 years. This particular measure, improving K-3 literacy, that's where you look at those cohorts. So from fall of kindergarten to fall of first grade, fall of first grade to fall of second grade, and so forth. And one of the things that that we have, a unique challenge with that maybe other districts don't, is that in West Clermont, when students come to us in kindergarten, around, at best, 50% of them are on track. And so that means that half of them aren't, and in some cases more than half of them aren't. And so that then triggers like you having this measure and needing to demonstrate that you've moved students from off track to on track. Many districts, if you have 90% of your kindergartners on track in kindergarten, you don't have this measure at all as a district or as a school. And so not only are we having to, are we having the unique challenge that is posed by having a significant number of our kindergarten students not on track when they come to us in kindergarten, but then we also have to, be able to demonstrate this progress that many of our districts don't. And so if the ultimate goal is third grade proficiency, when 90% of your students come to kindergarten on track, reaching that third grade proficiency is a different challenge than it is when only half of your students or less are. And so we're not using that as an excuse. In spite of that, we're working to really ensure that we're doing all we can to have all of our students get to proficiency in third grade. But there are for sure additional challenges that come to us as a result of that. No,
You broke it, Ellie.
lost my ability to. Can you flip me through, Dan? There we go. So in summary, again, just to kind of reiterate and hit some of the highlights, our overall rating, which is kind of like adding up all of the points that we earned in each of those categories, we jumped over 10% of the state in comparison to where we were last year. That put us 64 places, like 64 ranking places higher than we were last year. That it's the highest performance index score we've had since COVID. That across the county, in spite some of the challenges and opportunities that we have that are uniquely West Clermont, we are still performing well across the county. Our value-added growth, which again is showing that our students are making significantly more than a year's worth of growth, is in the top 11% across the entire state, and that we've seen our most significant gains as a direct result of our implementation of our curriculum and your investment in that, and that we are consistently closing gaps, significantly closing gaps across our student subgroups. Do you have any questions?
I don't have any questions. This isn't the first time I've seen this. We went over this the other day, earlier. But it's great. I mean, I think this is a great time for us to celebrate our achievements. I think we've done really great. We've moved up a lot, which is awesome. But it also kind of narrows it down and helps us see the places where we need to improve and to look at a little deeper and to do those kind of things. But it's exciting to see people, us moving ahead in the future. I think we're doing a great job.
Thank you.
Yeah. Good job.
So the next course you'll be looking at probably in the near future is social studies.
It is. So this year we have an innovation course of study that we're participating in, and then social studies is slated for the year after. We, especially at the elementary level, many of the teachers who teach social studies are also English language arts teachers. And so to have like back-to-back years of a new curriculum would have been really challenging for many of them. And so it just kind of was the right time to bring innovation in the middle of those 2 years so that we could get our ELA like under our belt a bit. Especially as so much of social studies and ELA are integrated with one another or could be integrated with one another. We're really excited for what we'll be able to do when that comes around.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, great question.
Thank you.
So, while we have a lot to celebrate, we don't just go around talking only about our report card results. If you remember, every year around the same time, and this has been going on for, I don't know how many years in a row, for quite some time, I would say like 10 years or more,
Oh, I
maybe.
think more, like maybe 20.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those like where it just feels like it's just always been a part of what we've done. But, districts across the state of Ohio came together to really say, look, while our report card rankings and indicators are really important, and they don't ever tell the full story of what the impact that a district is having on its students. And all of the ways that we're providing our students with a high quality, well-rounded educational experience. And so what districts now have, many if not all districts, I believe all districts, have begun to release at the same time that the report cards are released what they call their quality profile. And so this is our district's quality profile from the year 2023. And as you see, it's our Blazing New Trails quality profile. And so we're really excited to celebrate all of what we were able to accomplish together as a school system in partnership with our community and our educational partners, our support staff, families, etc. And so this really tells the story of our district in a much broader way. And if you flip through it, you'll see all sorts of things from our portrait of a graduate and how we're making that come to life. The themes of our new strategic plan that is going to take us to 2030. Kind of a snapshot of all the awards and accolades, the academic accomplishments of our students, both in terms of how much scholarship money they were able to earn, how many students completed dual enrollment credit, earned college credit plus or AP, or participated in apprenticeship programs, to ways that we're bringing learning beyond the classroom, and that we're really working to provide students with educational experiences that will give them a competitive advantage when they leave us. For us being able to celebrate the awards that either individual teachers or programs or the district as a whole have been able to receive this past year. Kind of taking a deeper dive into our school finances and what all that encompasses. Athletics and extracurriculars, our music programs, dance, etc., all of the ways that students are able to get involved beyond the classroom. And the list goes on and on. Partnerships, ways that we've been able to enhance our programming through the partnerships that we've built over the course of the years. Ways that we've remained engaged with the community. If you were to look at that and see the number of focus groups, how many people participated, the numbers of town halls that were held over the course of the school year, how many thought exchange participants we had, articulation meetings, ways that we worked to leverage student voice, etc. Like it really is impressive, and to really be able to highlight what we learned from those sessions and how we took that information and incorporated it into our thinking. How we were able to work with our CAC and our CAT, and the work that they were it was really the CAC that brought our strategic plan to the board. And it's just work that we think represents a much broader view of all of the things that are great about West Clermont, and we're really proud to release this alongside of our district report card.
Thank
Any
you.
questions about that?
Zipped right through that, didn't you?
Yeah, well, it was like hitting the highlights real fast,
Right,
but
you can get it right now online, and then it's coming in the mailboxes soon, so.
A lot of information. That's great.
So it's going out to all of our
Yeah.
50,000?
I don't know what the number is. 30,000,
Okay.
yes.
thank you very much.
Thank you, Ellen.
Thank
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So next up is public speaking. At each meeting, the board president will recognize visitors who wish to be heard. They are asked to fill out a card and to give it to the president or the treasurer before the meeting. Visitors who wish to address the board are asked to state their name, address, and school organization. Remarks must be addressed to the board and should be brief, 3 minutes and to the point. Speakers may offer such as objective criticism or suggestions regarding school operations or programs. The board will not hear personal complaints or on school personnel or against any persons connected with the school district unless those complaints have been first addressed through the individual's department or administrative involved. It does look like we have 2 people that would wish to speak tonight. Just remind you of the time. So the first one is Mr. Franklin Dewall.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Franklin DeWar. I've been a resident of this district for about 2 decades. Public service is a public trust. Unfortunately, the public trust has been betrayed by your superintendent, Natasha Adams. For the last 4 years, I've had an interaction with her, and I'm going to share 4 key points that need to be addressed and investigated as a road to trust and selective leadership for your most valuable asset, our students, while allocating resources in the correct fashion to keep the public trust. The first key point, during the last school levy, I talked with Ms. Adams over the phone, and I censored her with the threat of a FOIA request and subpoena for allowing the filming of students during school hours, allegedly without parental consent, creating pre- and post-political ads on YouTube and Facebook. During that ORC 3517.21 violation and other ethics violations, when confronted, she first blamed Jeffrey Ryle. When I asked her who should be subpoenaed, she acknowledged it was wrong. I was given confirmation it wouldn't happen again. She indicated multiple times that she didn't think anything was wrong, and seeming not to acknowledge the lack of ethics. Exploiting minors for personal or financial gain is always wrong, and those who engage in this activity with public money betray the public trust. The second point, over the last year I've attended multiple town hall meetings. I've seen some of the folks in here in those meetings. Door prizes were given out. Indeed, these meetings were there in order to help a new generation be gainfully employed. I've offered in the public sector and the private sector to make jobs available somewhat to the 30,000 tune. Again, with the same administrator, no phone call back. When gainful employment is at your door for your students, if you fail to follow up and get people gainful employment, then you're keeping seniors out of the path of jobs. Number 3, holding staff accountable is something that I was able to do through Freedom of Information Act request over the last few years. It seems many a times the folks here use an act of subterfuge. You don't really have student attendance issues so much as over the last 4 or 5 years you've had staff attendance issues. And when it meets a critical mass, you use a calamity day as an act of subterfuge, even if similarly situated school districts, federal agencies, state agencies have no issue getting their employees to work. You, in fact, cannot. And then finally, something that seems to be in the news often, the $1.7 million of a loss to which normal school districts are checking electronic deposit to make sure that if something is incrementally drained from public trust over time, the question is, who was fired? Or what processes and places do you have so that can't happen again?
Thank you, Mr. DeWall. Your time is.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Appreciate you. Thank you. Next up is Mr. Chris Hicks.
Hi there, my name is Chris Hicks. I live at 444 Woodward Court, Cincinnati, Ohio. Thank you for letting me speak. I realize that all you guys have a very tough job and have to deal with a lot of issues that an educational system shouldn't have to deal with that happen in our society. I'm here to comment on the tax bond. And my personal opinion is that more and more property tax is not the answer to school funding. I've listened to, for decades, the school systems talk about unconstitutional system, unfair, but every time they come back to the well for the same exact thing. And the reality is there. Grandma is getting taxed out of her house. We look for property taxes, unfortunately, in Ohio to fund essentially everything from libraries, mental health, seniors, parks, police, and fire, and it just is not sustainable. Where there are places where there are an alternative, in school systems in particular, you have to do it differently. An income tax is much fairer. And personally, I'm going to strongly oppose any attempt at a property tax increase to fund anything else for the schools. And it's not a statement of the schools and funding. It's a statement of a fairness approach as to how we are raising monies to finance the schools. I also want to very quickly comment that I think that some of the approaches, like even the report up there, these propagandistic approaches are not good to overcoming objections and addressing objections from the community. They're more, I feel like I've gone to 3 of these town halls or workshops or whatever they're called, and I feel like it's a propaganda session to create useful idiots to support the plan, versus looking for what are the objections and how do we overcome the objections. That's the part of the community you need to deal with, not the ones that are already going to be on the team, but the people that are going to object. In that report that you put up there, I'd encourage you all to go read a corporate report. What do corporate reports have in them? What are the risk factors? What are the problems? What are the challenges? What are the this? Not just the hope, the inspiration, all the great things that are happening. I think I and others are looking for a much more serious approach about how the schools are funded for the long term that doesn't tax grandma out of her house. I also want to acknowledge in my last few seconds here that I noticed Trustee John Becker in the back of the room. I appreciate him coming to meetings like this. I think the relationship between the school district and the trustees has gone downhill, and it needs to get fixed. It needs to get fixed fast. There are dumb things going on, like I joked with Mr. Patton beforehand, because of the drizzling, I didn't go ahead and get my drink on out in the parking lot, since it's now a legal Dora drinking area every day from 5 till 10, which is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. That people can come to your meetings and walk outside and drink and stand in front of the building drinking right now because the trustees. So I hope that will change and that will get fixed. Thank you for the time speaking with you, and please, let's not tax grandma out of her home. Income tax is a much better way if you need to get more funding for the schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hicks. Appreciate you. Okay, moving on, it looks like we're on to the personnel agenda. Dr. Foltz, thank you.
Good evening. In front of you is the personnel agenda for September 23rd, 2024. On the agenda today that we have the retirement of Lisa Reeves, our world history language teacher at West Clermont High School, I believe a French teacher?
Yes.
She has been with us 35 years, 27 at Glen Estee High School, and the remainder at West Clermont High School. So we wish her well in her next adventure. I would say that in French, but I'm not a French. I don't speak French. So we also have the resignation of 1 teacher, 1 computer tech, 1 healthcare assistant. The agenda also includes the proposed hiring of 1 special education teacher, 1 cafe worker, and 2 paraprofessional aides. On the agenda, we have the proposed approval of salary placement for those teachers continuing their education. We have 1 teacher moving from a bachelor's degree to a master's, and 1 teacher from a master's degree to a master's plus 15. Of course, we've always valued continued education as they take what they've learned and pass it on to our kids. On this agenda, we have the proposed approval of supplemental contracts for multiple clubs, building leadership team, multiple band positions, lighthouse team, curriculum leaders, after-school intervention, parking lot monitors, and coaches. Included in this agenda is the proposed approval for multiple unpaid leaves of absence, substitute cafe workers, and multiple school volunteers and student teachers. This concludes the review of the personnel agenda submission for your consideration.
Dr. Fultz.
Certainly want to wish good luck to Ms. Reeves. I had no idea it's been 35 years. She was brought in when we had, the course load was too much for just me at Glen Estee. So I wish her a good retirement.
Thank you.
Item 6.02 is request for approval of the minutes. Those are for the meeting that was held on September 9th. It was a regular business meeting. Item 6.03 are the adult lunches. The prices, actually for the food service prices for the 24-25 year, and the only increase was in the adult lunches. I believe it went up 10 cents. Item 6.04 is the request for approval of donations as presented. There are three. Cincinnati Reds Community Fund donated $250 to Amelia Elementary for physical education supplies. Market Support Services donated 4 sideline Gator Aid cards to West Clermont High School athletics. Tabitha Remington donated $50 to Summerside Elementary for supplies for students in need. Item 6.05 is request for approval of the tuition rates for the 24-25 year. The State Department of Education calculates those rates for us. They do that by looking at the local taxes received and the state support that is provided, dividing that out by the number, or by the ADM within that school district. In our case, those rates for the current school year, for the year is $11,921.21 on an annual basis. The state aid portion of that is $3,187.94. And the net for the Ohio resident then is $8,733.27. The other part of that resolution looks at dividing that out to semester rates, monthly rates, and per diems, both on a full-time basis and then for half-day preschool and kindergarten. Item 6.06 is the request and authorization for the superintendent and treasurer to negotiate and execute contracts. There are 2 listed. One is for the cybersecurity insurance for the renewal of that, and the second is for leadership acceleration. Item 6.07 is request for the approval of the financial statements, the bills paid lists, and the investments. Those are for the reports for the period ending August 31st, 2024. And so the request then is for items 6.01 through 6.07 of the consent agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Romano. You have heard the recommendation. Would someone like to make a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Rudy. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Sanborn. Is there any discussion? Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Rudy?
Yes.
Ms. Sanborn?
Yes.
Mrs. Spencer?
Yes.
Mr. Patton?
Yes.
4 yes. Thank you.
So are we moving on to the financial plan?
So next item that we wanted to discuss is looking at and developing a 2030 financial plan and overview. And I honestly, as I was putting this together and putting it on the agenda, didn't know that Mrs. Preston was going to do the presentation on the results that we had this past year. But I think it really kind of ties together as we go forward. There we go. So the 5 items that I really want to talk about in this financial plan overview is what is a 2030 financial plan? Why are we looking at developing it now? how is the 2030 financial plan similar or different from the annual appropriation measure, our 5-year forecast, which is done twice a year? What is to be considered in the 2030 financial plan, and how will it be developed as we go forward? Just quite simply, the 2030 financial plan, as we put it together, and we really have not done a multi-year financial plan in the past. But it's going to be a multi-year financial roadmap to support and guide the district's strategic plan, including the vision, the goals, and aspirations as adopted by the Board of Education. One of the things that I've found over my career is some local governments would actually look at a budget first and then put a plan together. And where I think it's really more appropriate is for the district to put the plan together. What is its vision? What are the goals that it has? What are the aspirations? And put a financial plan then together to have the ability to execute on it. One of the best examples that we have of this is back in 2021, and we were in the midst of COVID, but then there were some federal relief funds that came about. If you recall, the district had just passed the levy in 2020. The first collection was in 21 of that property tax, and those taxes, or that levy, was really just for continuation of existing services. There was nothing really additional for that. It was promoted that way. It was identified to last at least through 2024, current year that we're in now. During 2021, there were federal relief dollars, the acronym ESSER, identified that. There was $14 million provided to this school district from 2020 through actually this September 2024 for the school district to spend. One of the, I believe to me, the great thing that came together very rapidly, very quickly, was how those dollars would be spent. And then also at the same time, there was a property valuation increase, which did yield approximately $3 million additional to the school district. When that plan was put together, unlike I think some other district, we had already, or this district had already identified the needs on how to use those funds. And those needs were very specific with the curriculum, with the program, and what needed to occur with people, with program, with the infrastructure, and then some essentials that may have been, essential needs that might not have been funded in the past. With that upward and onward plan as it was described, I think Ellie really showed the results of if you identify the needs, if you put a plan together, and you can execute on that plan, it can show you that you can get some very positive results. And again, that's really, I think, what Ellie was going over this evening with that. A lot of those results, especially I think the curriculum cycle that was adopted back then was not on the drawing board, and as the upward and onward plan came together, it was very easily identified that needed to be done. So why are we talking about this now? Why 2030? Well, first of all, there is a 2030 strategic plan on what we want to do in this district. The board reviewed that in January, confirmed that a few months after that. They did that not only with the vision and mission, but with the strategic objectives and with the goals and aspirations that it had for this district. As it really looks to plan to the future, it's really prudent on our part to put a financial plan together and/or alternative plans to ensure that the stakeholders are aware of that impact to them. It is also prudent on our part that if we can't fund those things, what are some alternative things that need to happen with that? In this district, and actually I think we're ahead of the pack of some school districts across the state, there is a heavy reliance on local funding, and that is truly unfortunate. There is a school funding formula, the Fair School Funding Formula. This district is on a guarantee, What that really amounts to is that we get no more dollars than we did in 2019 from the state. Thus, inflation, student enrollment increases, increases in special needs, other increases really kind of fall back on local funds. And again, that's truly unfortunate, but that is the funding mechanism that we're under. And yes, there are choices that can be made as we look, into future, when we need to go back to the voters, whether that is a property tax, whether that is an income tax. That's something that the community, may need to look at and decide with it. It's also prudent because there are best practices out there. Right now, with a lot of local governments, the budget really is approved just 1 year at a time. And so it then becomes pretty iterative of what you do 1 year to the next. If you take a longer term approach to it, where your financial plan can parallel that strategic plan, there's a lot more continuity in what you're doing. There's established linkages between what our dollars are spent on and the goals that the district has. There's a focus on the decisions that need to be made, and really a focus on the outcomes. Again, I think the greatest outcomes that we want really have to do with the student performance. The other thing that financial plan does, because it's more than just 1 year, looking out 5 years to 2030, it really relies on us heavily communicating with the public, with our stakeholders, and what we see ahead of us to do.
One of the stakeholder group that we meet with is, back to this being capped at 2019, is our legislators to advocate for fully funding the formula. It's in its last phase and it hasn't been fully funded yet. We also are advocating for the inputs to be updated, because inputting at 2019 levels is not helping us at, in 2024 and beyond. So those are part of our efforts that we're doing with our other organizations.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, aside from just looking at the dollars that we receive as we did within the last board meeting or two, is our advocacy really looks at our community. And there is a belief that we have that there needs to be some targeted relief. We do realize and understand the increase in the valuation, and in our district, not in all districts, but in our district, that did create an increase to local property taxpayers to their tax bills. The state, on the other hand, because valuations did go up, and there's an inverse relationship with the local wealth to what the state gives us. The higher the local wealth in property tax and average income, the lower than the state provides to us. So one of the things that we promote is some targeted relief for individuals within the community that may fall in there. There is currently a bill that looks at doing that. How's the financial plan, a 2030 financial plan, similar, different than some things we're already doing? So later on this evening, before September 30th, the board approves an annual appropriation measure. That appropriation measure is for this current 24-25 budget. It's the authorization to spend money. As you'll recall, we passed a temporary in June for the start of the year. In September, the district looks at an annual appropriation. That appropriation is also built into our 5-year forecast as we go forward. What's the difference or similarity between the 2030 financial plan that we put together and a 5-year forecast? 5-year forecast really looks at continuing existing services. For some knowns that are there, if we know and believe that there's going to be an enrollment increase, we do add staff in there for that. If we know of some other things that come about, we try and build that in there. But for the most part, it is really a continuation of services, and what it really looks at is the financial well-being and or stress that's put upon the district to do that. So what do we consider when we put the financial plan together? Quite definitely, what our mission is, where we're going with our vision, what are our underlying values, what are the strategic initiatives, and what are the goals and aspirations, within which the district has adopted and which we're looking at fulfilling to do that. So That's the main drivers of what we look at spending money, for this district, and that's really the guide for us. What we focus on, A, is continuing the programs that exist. I'll kind of go back to the slide from the beginning, that when we talked about the onward and upward 3 years ago, one of the things that we did not want to do was add something that we eventually would have to cut. So there was really an effort to sustain what we added. One of the things that we targeted is that we didn't want to add unless there was a resource to continue that. And so I think we effectively did that as we moved forward. The second thing to look at or consider is what are some of the essential needs that may not be being met within the school district. As we looked at our spending per pupil, in 2020 and prior to, we were in the bottom 5% or less of spending per student in the district. That has moved up, primarily moved up because of the ESSER funds, to about 16-17% from the bottom that we spend. If we look at differences between similar school districts or the state average, that can go anywhere from $50,000 to $60,000 per classroom. And if we had that additional funds, that would be a lot better. And I'm not saying that that should come from locally, I'm just saying that there is a difference in the dollar amount per pupil that we spend in this district to other districts around the state. One of the things that we're really proud of, if you really consider spending in the lower, below 20%, in that 16%, and you achieve the results that Mrs. Preston talked about, your return is pretty good. And the return from making those investments the last 3 or 4 years have really shown that we can, that where we put our money in certain areas, we can really improve those test scores, we can improve student performance, and we can provide a good return to the people in the community. The other item is to identify and cost out the resources that may be needed to meet those aspirational goals. So how do we continue our program? How do we look at needs that may be unmet? And then how do we look at what resources are needed so that we can accomplish those aspirations and goals that the board approved and put out for us? The other difference between between the 5-year forecast and the 2030 plan, the 5-year forecast really just looks at the general operating fund. It doesn't consider some of the other funds, okay? It doesn't consider a permanent improvement fund. It doesn't consider, which is really for capital needs. It doesn't consider some of the local school building funds where students and parents and other are raising funds to enhance the activity that goes on in the school. It doesn't necessarily consider the state and federal programs. It indirectly does, but not directly to it. In a 2030 plan, we want to look at all sources of revenue and what the opportunity is for that. What are the risks of maybe some of those disappearing in the future? What are the opportunities where we could look at and obtain more funding as we go forward? So,
and I can give you examples of each of these categories just to help you wrap your brain off. For continuing the current program, obviously the curriculum cycle is a huge added value that we want to continue. So that would be continuing the current program. Under essential needs that are not being met, at this stage we still don't have full specials in the elementary. We still haven't been able to touch the middle school start time with the transportation. And so those would kind of be examples that fit into things we've already identified. They're essential needs. Those needs are not being met at this time. And then the third thing is really about more details in our strategic plan, where that would be investments in additional SROs or looking at the transformation of our libraries and what that would take. And so that kind of gives you a sense of like what each bucket represents.
So, and I know we talked I talked a little bit, so the superintendent, about the state funding formula. When the formula was adopted, one of the particulars of it is that all of the funding, all of the components were put in a formula. Historically, in the past, there was a base calculation, and then there were other items called categorical, which were outside. So special needs, gifted, English language learners, career and technology, those components had a funding mechanism outside of the formula. But the Fair School funding formula, they were all tied together and wrapped in the funding formula, and you were either on the formula or on a guarantee. Within this district, what we see happening is some of those components on the categorical programs, we have enrollment increases, but because of what's considered our local wealth, we're capped. So in essence, what is happening as enrollment trends may show those categorical programs increasing and we don't get any more money, there's almost a shift from how we spend our money from regular ed to some of the categorical areas, okay? The state even says because of that formula, where that funding mechanism within the formula increases, we have to spend the money that way. So they're telling us that is increasing, but they're not giving us any more funding to do that. So we have to find where that funding comes from in order to do that. The importance of that with a 2030 plan or looking out not just 1 year, but looking out 5 years. We know that in this district, their trends in those categorical programs are increasing, okay? So they're increasing faster than enrollment growth. As that happens, there is a shift on how we spend money, okay? And it's just an important note. It's probably confusing everybody when I'm saying that, but it is a reality that internally we have to face as a district as we look at how we spend our dollars to do that, okay? Which sometimes means there may be less as we go forward for regular education in order to do that. So developing this plan, one of the things that we want to target is in November, we do our first 5-year forecast for the 24-25 year, okay? What we're trying to do is put together a draft of a 2030 financial plan that's reflective of the strategic initiatives that we have, which means that we need to work with the administrative team. We need to work with other stakeholder groups in identifying what those 3 categories of needs are within the district. How do we continue what we have in place? Identifying the unmet needs that may be out there, and then what are the required resources so that within 3 to 5 years, we are moving along obtaining those goals and aspirations that the board had set out for the district to achieve. I'll go back to the onward and upward plan. The ability for this district to execute on that plan the way it was is because when the dollars came, they had already had the needs identified. And so having that already done really helped accelerate, really put the plan in place. There were numerous districts throughout the state that, quite frankly, didn't know how to spend the money when it came to them, okay? And maybe spend it on things that were ongoing needs versus one-time only needs. And so the thought process that we went through really was accelerated because those needs were already identified. And so for us to go through that again, exercise again and identify things, probably is pretty important for us to do. Okay. So we're going to target with the first draft when we do the 5-year forecast, should be a high parallel to what we do with the 2030 financial plan with our 5-year forecast in November. Okay. Questions on what we're trying to put through? There's a question there, I think.
No, there is just a lot, and I appreciate you breaking it down, and I understand it a little. I'll get to it more, I'm sure that, and you do a great job. We'll figure it out, we'll keep moving forward.
Yeah, I think the big thing is we just can't do 1-year budgets, just a series of 1-year budgets. We have to look beyond our 5-year forecast, which just really looks at continuation, and we have to really match almost a commitment to how we want to spend our dollars to what our plan is and our strategic initiatives. I think that's pretty important for us to do.
Well, I follow this David Ramsey guy, and this is what he says all the time. He said, if you don't tell your money where to go, it's going to tell you where it's going. So, and that's a good idea. I mean, move ahead and figure it out before you get it. Try to keep us moving forward.
He helped me pay off my credit card debt.
I know, he's awesome. He's a very smart man.
So as I continue to say, Mr. Romano, the transparency piece that you put, by putting this plan out there, the videos that you've put out to try to help understand, this is a complicated budget that we have with a lot of restraints. And so I always appreciate the information that you give. It's always helpful to understand. Anything else?
Are you, do you have comments? You want
Yeah,
me to do
well, no,
appropriation?
just put up the presentation.
Oh, sorry.
Well, Dan is getting it ready. I just want to review the timeline that we're following with our engagement process, as well as your decision timelines, so everyone understands how this process is working. Later this week, you can see we're at September 23rd right now for the financial plan. Later this week, Dan and I will be leading the first Financing Our Future tabletop exercise that we've targeted business leaders in our community as the first round. This will be one of those sessions that we do instead of in large town hall settings, in smaller, more intimate groups. And the whole idea is to help the community understand and build financial literacy around fair school funding, what it means in Ohio, where those dollars go. And I think it'll provide real opportunity for questions and a deeper understanding. So that begins on September 26th, and will just continue to be offered throughout the year, probably for the next several. October 4th is alumni event. It's homecoming time, so we will invite everyone to be part of homecoming festivities with the parade, the game, the tailgate, all of that. October 9th, we move to Merwin Elementary. We'll be doing a tour as well as another Blazing New Trails Town Hall. October 15th, we'll be back here together. It's a Tuesday. Usually our meetings are on Mondays, and so this is a Tuesday meeting where we will share all the information that you've been asking of us that relates to the CAT plan. So you made a resolution last time to say, we recognize these challenges, we see the CAT plan as a possible solution to those challenges. We want to know more. What's the financial impact? What's the educational impact? What's the operational impact? So we'll be working with Ohio Facilities Commission, with our architects, with legal, and bringing all of that together for you in one. It'll be a pretty overwhelming presentation, I'll tell you now, but you'll have several weeks to digest it and to break it down and to get your questions answered. We'll also bring in that time the perception data we've been gathering, information from the town hall, so you can continue to get a sense of public sentiment. On the 28th, 2 weeks later, essentially, is when the board would consider the plan. So this still doesn't put it on the ballot, but it affirms that the plan details that I brought to you that night is something that you are considering as a viable solution. And there's likely maybe more information you might want, or something shared at a different angle or a different approach, whatever. You'll give us more direction that night on October 28th, depending on your vote. In November, I included the 4th and 5th because it's a time when we'll be coming together for staff with professional development. So it'll give me another opportunity to kind of give a state of things to the staff, talk about our vision, help bring them along. Then we move our attention to the middle school. That's the town hall and tour on November 14th. We really do plan to target our elementary parents there, parents that are in pre-K to 4th grade. We really see the proposal that's been put on the table by the CAT team as something that is going to most impact the families and the children in that age group. So we'd like them to come and get a chance to see the middle school and see the future planning. The first step toward putting an issue on the ballot would be on November 25th. It's a resolution of necessity, and that would be something for you guys to consider when that will trigger for Dan to begin to work with the auditor's office, to work on the financing, to vet the language, to make sure all the ducks are in a row. And then that final step would be in December 9th, a resolution to proceed. And so that would give us all the authority to then start moving with the auditor's office to put a ballot issue on for May of 25. The rest of the timeline really just highlights other reports that we'll be releasing, as well as engagement activities in a high-level way. We haven't really set the calendar for second semester, kind of because it depends on your decision-making on how we will proceed with that. So any questions about the timeline?
If someone wanted to find this timeline,
Yes.
Because it's public record.
Yes.
If someone wanted to find it.
Well, it's on the board docs. They could see it right here in my comments. We've been posting it on social media. It's been sent to our families. It's on our website. So it's in multiple locations.
Thank you.
So it's on there
Yes.
now?
Uh-huh. Yes. That's it for me.
Thank you.
Now let's
Does anybody else have any
Got it.
questions?
So the last,
Well, I guess she wanted to know if they had questions.
Do you have a question?
Well, no, that October 28th,
Yes.
that's when we consider the plans of the CAT team and your, is that right?
It'll be
Is
like
there
the
a vote? Is
superintendent
there action
recommendation.
that we have to do?
There's a vote,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
It's not a vote that puts it on the ballot. It's just, it's a vote to say, we've recognized the challenges, we've seen the updated proposal from the superintendent with all the details,
Okay.
and we affirm the process moving forward. We just want to we maybe want to know more, or, you know, you might need something from us.
Okay,
So, yep.
thank you.
Thank you.
okay. Under item 8.01 is the annual appropriation measure for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2025, the year that started this past July. The appropriation measure total for carryover encumbrances from last year, it's approximately $4.6 million, including all funds. For the annual appropriations for FY '25, including the operating fund, the bond retirement fund, all the special revenue funds, is $145,714,000. The total appropriation is $150,332,773. The appropriation measure is the authorization that the board gives the administration, superintendent, myself, and the team, the authority to spend money with it. This appropriation measure is in line with prior forecasts in the 5-year forecast. It does end with, it does provide us a balanced budget for this year as we go forward, or as close to a balanced budget with the revenues and expenses as we get. This year is kind of a point where we look at balancing out in the future years. When you see the forecast in November, it starts turning a little bit. So that's why we need to look at and work the 2030 financial plan as we go forward. But it is a continuation of things that we have started in the past. Note that, you know, one of the funds that is missing or is dwindling down is the ESSER money. We did spend all of our allocation. It needed to be spent by the end of September, and we did do that. There are some things that we were able to continue within our operating fund that had been planned at least 2 years in the past, that we could continue those on, and we made measures to do that. So the request to the board is to adopt the annual appropriation measure for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2025.
Thank you, Mr. Romano. You've heard the recommendation. Would someone like to make a motion? So moved. Thank you, Mr. Rudy. Is there a second?
A second.
Thank you, Ms. Spencer. Is there any discussion?
So we have to do this now versus wait until you tell us the 5-year forecast plan? In other words,
Yes.
we do it ahead of the 5-year forecast?
Yeah, so there's a 5-year forecast that we did in May.
Right.
And this is in line with that forecast. It puts us reasonably within with the same numbers, not the exact same numbers, but within that format. This, then we build this appropriation measure into the November 5-year forecast. So that forecast is done twice a year. We can actually do it more often if we want to, okay? You know, as we get new information, we can put that in there. But it's required that we adopt an annual appropriation before September 30th. So the temporary is done in June for the beginning July 1, temporary authority to spend. The annual appropriation needs to be approved by September 30th.
Okay, makes sense now. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good question. That's good.
Is there anything else?
No.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Rudy.
Yes.
Mrs. Spencer.
Yes.
Mr. Patton.
Yes.
Mrs. Sanborn.
Yes.
4 yes. Thank you. The only comment that I have is that, you know, again, I'm excited about the results that the district has that Mrs. Preston showed, and hopefully the team realizes that I think the treasurer's probably one of the biggest cheerleaders of that curriculum department and what we're doing in the classroom. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Milano. Moving on to board comments. I will start with Mrs. Spencer.
Well, I just want to thank everybody for coming out. I appreciate sometimes it's hard to get out on a Monday night with work and children and school and the whole thing, but I do assure you that we appreciate your comments and that we're listening to what you have to say. We are excited about the new report card and how great we've done and all the great things we've done, but again, it does show that there are things that we can work on, just like anything else. There are things that we need to work on. And I agree again still that our district has and continues to support our outstanding educators, and they, along with their parents and their guardians, will be the ones that truly make a difference in their children's life, just like in their students, academically mostly. Just like I think Holly Hill, they moved up to 4 stars, and that's one of the oldest buildings that we have. But he's relatively a new principal, but they love him out there. Whatever he's doing, it's awesome. They're doing great. And I think it's outstanding that we've got 4 stars out of that. And most of all of our schools went up on their stars. A couple of them, we gotta work on, but they did great. That's all.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Ms. Sanborn.
Thank you for the report card update, Ellie, tonight. I really appreciate it. I'm going to highlight Willowville Elementary. They have really done a great job since Mr. Jones has been there. They have really moved their stars up, and I appreciate all the hard work he's done, and especially the teachers that teach the students. If they didn't have the teachers to teach the students, they wouldn't have the report card that they have now, and I really appreciate all that he's done. I've heard nothing but good things from him being in that school district now and building, and I think that speaks volumes to Ms. Adams hiring him as an employee, and it speaks volumes of him being a great principal and moving the district forward. And where he's probably going to be actually on the rise pretty soon. So, thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Sanborn. Mr. Rudy.
Ellie, thank you for your report. And I just want to point out that it's difficult to make progress in a large district like this, and that speaks to the staff, all of you, from teachers on up, working hard on this. Very much appreciated.
Thank you, Mr. Rudy. A couple things that I've got written down. Prior to our board meeting today, I attended 2 committee meetings. One of them was the operations committee meeting that was held at 5. Just a couple of things that we talked about. One is some of the work that they're doing at the middle school. They did have to do some repairs in the parking lot, so they got some of the potholes patched, and they did some of the work back there. There was a little bit of a traffic flow pattern that they did have to change for safety reasons, so they did make those changes. Something else at the middle school is that it has been brought to our attention that the middle school boiler is starting to have some issues, and so down the road that's going to have to be looked at. It's my understanding that that is about a model guesstimated between a 1998 and a 1999. So we're hopeful, fingers crossed, that we're going to be able to repair that. It does look like some of the parts are older. They are available, but unfortunately are going to take some time. So we are going to start working on that now. Obviously, we're still in the warm weather, so we're okay for that. Some of the other things I wrote down for the operations committee meeting that we had is that our admin team will be meeting with the OFCC here in the near future to discuss our enrollment. We're going to be looking at our enrollment. We're always paying attention to our enrollment. Enrollment is something that does fluctuate. In the blink of an eye, a subdivision can go up pretty quickly, and so we got to take those things into consideration. Especially if the time comes that we're making buildings, we want to make sure that we're able to house the buildings without having to come back to taxpayers. The other, this was just a quick mental, or not a mental note, but a note that I put that I also attended the personnel committee. I went in place of Michael since he wasn't able to join today. And one of the things that they did today was they had it's called the BEST training, and it stands for Building Building Effective Solutions Together. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to get people to take ownership and to try to come up with, if they have a problem at hand, try to find the solution for that problem. And so they did that today, and I believe if my numbers serve me correctly, there were 28 staff members that attended and 9 principals that were at that meeting. And it's our understanding in the committee meeting, guys, that it was a pretty good, successful meeting today. We do have a lot of the buy-ins on that, which is important. So you find a problem, find a solution, and try to fix it. I know Natasha has already said these things, but again, well, first I would like to say again, I appreciate the community's input today. That is always appreciative. That is something that we as a board, including myself, has said that we want the community to get involved, regardless of what side of the fence you're on. Get involved. That's how you get information. That's how you can make informed decisions. So the next town hall meeting, as Natasha has already said, I'll just reiterate, is October the 9th. It is at 5 p.m. and that will be at our Merwin Elementary. Again, I encourage people to show up at that. That particular building is one of our older buildings. We currently have 6 modulars? Six modulars. We have 6 modulars on that campus.
6 classrooms, there's 3, but 6 classrooms.
That's okay, thank you
Yeah.
for the clarification. So again, that is going to be October the 9th. Please come out and take a look at that building. Our next board meeting will be October the 15th at 7 p.m. at the Civic Center. So, and again, I don't need to reiterate what everybody else says. I do appreciate the report card. I wanted to kind of highlight some of those other things. So with that being said, I do not believe that we have a need to go in executive session. So would someone like to make a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Go ahead. Ms. Sanborn, is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Rudy. Assuming there would be no discussion, I would go without saying, on behalf of Mr. Chumley, who is not here, who day. I don't know why that just popped in my head, but I have to say who day. So, Mr. Romano?
Ms. Sanborn?
Yes.
Mr. Rudy?
Yes.
Mrs. Spencer?
Yes.
Mr. Patton?
Yes.
4 yes.